All right, well, it is 10 o'clock, so we're going to get started. I'm going to be talking for just a few minutes to familiarize all of you with WebEx if you haven't been here with us before. My name is Heather Flett. I use she, her, hers pronouns, and I am the VOCA training coordinator for the authority. Thanks all for joining us. We had an overwhelming interest in this session, which is great to hear. For those of you who have not used WebEx before, I want to give you a quick rundown of a few features so you know what's happening. You should have a chat box where you can type. Some of you have already typed where you're from, but go ahead and do that. Make sure you've selected send to all participants if you want everyone to see it. Otherwise, if you want to just text me, I'm the host. If you're having technical issues, I can help you with that if you send a message just to the host. And then Caleb's the presenter if you want to, don't text just him because he's busy presenting. So text it to me and I'll let him know that it's there. So that is the chat box. Also, he's going to ask you to do some participation. So give me you should all have a little green check mark or a red X. If you're on the phone, not all of these features work. So use the ones you have. Don't worry about doing everything we ask you to, but give me a green check mark if you're glad that it's Friday. Awesome. So Natasha is not glad it's Friday. Olga is not glad it's Friday. They must have stressful weekends coming up. All right, fair enough. So we'll be doing some yes and no. And if you have a question, right now you're muted. You're muted on entry. If you want to be unmuted, we can do that. So go ahead and raise your hand right now. There's a little hand icon you can see. That will indicate to us that you want to talk. And Caleb, you can see people are raising their hand. You see the little number. You also hear, you can probably hear a sound, Caleb,
yeah.
To warn you. So if you want to clear everyone out, Caleb, that'd be awesome. The other thing that Caleb's going to ask you to do is use your arrow. You should have above your, you should see the 2020 user survey webinar slide, and above or next to it, you should have a little arrow and a T and a pencil. If you click on the arrow, it will highlight, and then, yep, Betty, you got it. You've been on my webinars before. You can click on that. Jennifer, you got it, right? Alyssa, great. So he's going to ask you to do that too. Again, like none of this is, you're not going to fail the webinar if you don't do this. So if you can't get the text to work, don't let it get in your way. We're also going to do a poll later on. That should be pretty self-explanatory. I am recording this session, so everything you do, everything you type, everything you chat will be recorded, and we haven't decided yet if we're going to put it on our YouTube channel, but it will be kind of out in the world, so just to warn you about that. I can also tell if you're doing something else. A little red arrow exclamation point shows up, so it's a little Big Brother feature. So just so you know, and I get a report at the end how many minutes you were paying attention. So just to warn you that that is happening in the background. If you have your camera turned on, you will show up in the presenter screen when you're speaking. You also are in the background, but no one knows how to find it, so don't worry about that. So just to warn you that if your camera is on, when you talk, we will see you. I think that is everything. Again, if you're having any issues, feel free to chat me in the chat box and I can do some technical assistance. But at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer, who is going to introduce herself and Caleb in the presentation.
Thank you, Heather. Hi, everybody. I see a lot of familiar names and some that I don't recognize, so looking forward to getting to know you all. I just wanted to introduce Caleb. I mean, truly, my name should not even be on this slide because he did 100% of the work from designing many of the survey questions, administering it, monitoring the responses, and summarizing the findings, and developing all of the content that you'll see today. I'm kind of an old timer here, as many of you know, but Caleb joined our team in May. I believe he was only the second authority staff person to start remotely, and has already accomplished so much. Caleb has a lot of letters after his name. He has his bachelor's, his master's, he's got his PhD, I think from UIC in sociology with concentrations in race, ethnicity, and gender. And he has taught at several colleges, including Northeastern Illinois, UIC, and North Central College in Naperville. So he's really been mostly in the academic world. He's interested in people's relationship or non-relationship with religion, as well as how public policy opinions may differ among race, ethnicity, and gender. And he loves board games. He loves to cook, especially dishes from all different sorts of countries. And we just feel very fortunate here at ICJA that he's chosen us to get his feet wet in the government world as well as victim services. So really, again, Caleb, this is all 100% Caleb. I'm just here to provide support, help with questions as I can, and most importantly, learn from him as well as you all. So thanks again, all of you, for being here today, and I'm going to turn it over to Caleb.
So thanks, Jen, for that introduction, and thanks to all of you for showing up here today. It was good to see so much interest. So I'm going to be sharing a little bit about the user survey and also elicit some more information from you. At times I'm going to hope you'll participate and share your own unique perspectives. So this followed the 2016 user survey, which was used in large part to help inform the InfoNet 2.0 updates. And we hope to do a little bit of the same with this. We hope that this survey and the ideas you'll provide here today will help give us and direct us about how we can improve InfoNet moving forward. So as you all know, right, because you took the survey and got everyone you knew to take it as well, right? This was a web survey. It was available for about 2.5 weeks in late August, early September. Unlike the 2016 survey, we opened this one up to multiple people within a given center. So we wanted to make sure that we heard multiple perspectives on this survey. And you can see the roles that everyone held. We got a wide mixture of perspectives chiming in. And these are not mutually exclusive. Over half of all people that responded held multiple roles at their center. Because we were getting multiple roles, it was a very good thing when we were asking opinion questions about how you feel about InfoNet. But it was a little challenging hearing from multiple people from a center when we asked objective questions about your center, like how many people work there, or do you have another data system? Because we had to aggregate by center in order to make sure centers where more people answered weren't weighted more heavily. So I went through all the questions about your center, got aggregated, and whenever there was a disagreement, I figured out, based on that question, how to proceed. Sometimes I just went with the median response from centers. Sometimes I prioritized what a program director said, or things like that. So overall, we had 129 respondents spread across 61 unique centers. 88% of them finished the survey, and those that didn't just had their partial responses recorded when the survey got closed. We'll move briefly through some basic information about the centers that answered. Just under half of them were specialized only in domestic violence. Another quarter specialized only in sexual assault, and 29% were dual centers, dealing with both sets of survivors. Centers were spread pretty evenly across the state of Illinois. Most common were centers in a mix of urban and suburbs or towns, but you can see we got the full gamut right here. So Heather filled me in on these neat little tools we have, and I probably went a little overboard with some of them, but I thought just to get all of us used to them, I thought we'd use that arrow tool, and again, it's the one in the upper left, to just indicate on the map where the center you're representing is from. I'll do the same for myself. Oops. Okay. Nice to see we have, we're going to hire from people from multiple corners of the state. Thanks for that. So centers had between 3 and 120 paid staff. The mean number of paid staff, though, was 29. And interestingly enough, center location didn't have any influence on how many paid staff places had. Urban centers and rural centers both had roughly the same number of total staff. So now we get into InfoNet habits. These next few things look at how you use InfoNet. So one of our big findings was, compared to the 2016 survey, there's been this movement away from having all direct service staff enter their own data towards having a designated person or people on hand to enter the data. So this was kind of one of the big things we found. There's also a group that reports a mixture of data entry habits. These can range from anything like services get entered by one person or one group, client intake is entered by another, or some people in the mixture said, well, we have a designated person, but some staff insist on entering their own data. So because there's been this slide towards having a designated person enter their data, I thought the first thing we'd ask you here today is, has anyone center made a switch one way or the other over the past 5 years, either switching towards having a designated data entry person or away from it? And we're interested in hearing why you did that, and also what are the pros and cons that came along with that switch. And again, if you have something, you can raise your hand.
I do not see any hands raised.
Guess it's time to move on.
So maybe this is just something people don't really have too much to say about, but I think that's okay. We have plenty of opportunities to get feedback on things.
Okay, sounds good. So we also looked at how frequently.
Some folks are chatting in the chat box too, Jen.
Yeah, sorry, I have to switch over to the chat box to see it. Give me a second.
So Rebecca says, we used to have volunteers assist, but now it's paid staff members. Okay.
Interesting.
Rebecca, any lessons learned from that switch? Okay, Barbara from Wings says data integrity is more important, and that's why we have designated staff do entry. Understand.
Okay, here's a big one. Pro, the data is done consistently across the board, especially with staff turnover. So yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes people have different standards, and fewer people you have, the more you can avoid that. Con, if you're relying on 1 or 2 people, you have to, and someone leaves, you have to get them next person up to speed. Okay, thanks for that.
Okay, Rebecca responded to our question, not too much, but now it's more designated staff that can take care of that work. So, yep, thank you.
Okay, thanks for all of that. So we also asked you about how frequently you enter data into InfoNet. We found that about 2/3 of centers enter data daily or a few times a week. There's a pretty big spread here, and some of the further measures, we actually looked at whether frequency of data entry impacts things like use of reports, and actually we found no real significant difference there. So it's definitely not the end of the world if you're a center that enters weekly or monthly. It seems like your experience with InfoNet is roughly the same, regardless of how frequently you enter data. And here are the roles that regularly use InfoNet. You see we have a wide range of people using it, but most common is data entry, administrative support, and those who provide direct services. and least common is people who direct or oversee programs. One of the big things we wanted to look at was whether or not an organization center is using another data system besides InfoNet. And over the past 4 years, you've seen there's been this shift towards places having a secondary data system, well, a second data system, I should say. The places that have another data system tend to be larger centers and more urban centers. Here we asked you what other data system you have. There was a pretty big variety. MXXL was the most common, but there was a variety, and there's a big mixture in that any other box, but the most common that we heard in the any other box was efforts to outcome. I guess that's a big one. So everyone who said they have another data system says, yeah, sometimes we have to double enter data into the other system and InfoNet. And 78% said that they sometimes enter data into their other system, but the data doesn't go into InfoNet. Most commonly, that's just because InfoNet isn't yet collecting that data, but it's also common for places to say it's just more convenient to view or analyze the data with another system or program. So if you remember later on in the user survey, we specifically asked you what information gets entered into your other system, but not InfoNet. But we thought right now we'd ask you guys, those of you that your other data system offers more for analysis, what does it offer for analysis? Is it something that InfoNet might be able to might be able to add going forward to help people out? So feel free to raise your hand, or I see one hand raised. I'm going to unmute you, Kevin. Okay.
We are using a secondary database for ESG, reporting for upload into Sage, which we've talked about before.
Okay.
This is Jennifer. I'm sorry, Kevin, I wanted to ask, because you know we're working on the HUD compatibility. If we are successful in completing that to the point where you can use it to upload your reports into Sage and whatnot, would that eliminate the need for the other system entirely, or would you still use it? Curious.
I would have to put some serious thought into it, in that we were using FileMaker in the past for our system internally to attach clients to InfoNet client ID. And when we're going on probably 3 years now with a secondary database, but when we went to the secondary database, we now use that to attach names to client IDs. So if we decided to turn it over to InfoNet for ESG reporting, which would mean we'd have to revisit how we want to attach names to client IDs. So
got it.
We had to do a lot of importing from FileMaker into the new system with all, so it wasn't an easy process to do that. So we would have to revisit that again at a later point.
Thank you.
Anyone else before we move on? Oh, I see Barbara. I'm going to unmute you, Barbara.
Hi. We use the second database because of other funder reporting, not just government grants, but other funders, whether it be foundation grants or business grants that are requesting other type of reporting, say outcomes and stuff that InfoNet currently doesn't provide. And the other thing is the same thing that what Kevin just said about attaching the name to the InfoNet ID, because it's really, really difficult. Not, it's like you have to have two separate file systems to keep track of who your clients are in InfoNet. And by having the other database, it really helps with that. And making sure that the information and the data integrity, which is another huge piece, stays together.
Okay, thanks Thanks for that, Barbara. So it sounds like a little bit of what you guys were both alluding to is also what we heard, that one of the major things that people put into this other data system, but not InfoNet. I guess I technically have to remute you just to make sure. Okay. One of the main things.
I think Delaney also had a comment that they wanted to share.
Oh, sorry. Is this in the chat or is this a hand up?
They had their hand up, and then you raised it.
Okay, sorry. Delaney, feel free to go now.
Hi. Our system, we actually run with dual states for Iowa and Illinois for our services, and we use Empower for Iowa. And I believe it's based off of grants and their information that they need, but that's why we use dual services, our dual systems for our services, just because we work with 2 states.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Okay, I think that's it. Sorry about almost skipping you. Okay, so one of the main things we heard was places enter data that just per our user agreement, InfoNet can't collect, like anything identifying like name or emergency contact telephone or social security number, or at this point just a non-starter. But the other things that get collected are things we might want to consider. So what? I'm sorry, I'm going to mute. Okay. So who am I hearing? Someone's typing.
I got it.
Okay, thanks. But the other things we'll go over are things people said they either put into this other data system or just wishes they had InfoNet for InfoNet to collect. So the most common ones were case notes, therapy notes, and overall client service plans. There was also a lot of interest in us collecting information related to immigration and citizenship status. And multiple people also said, beyond just collecting whether or not someone speaks English, we should be collecting it more like a spectrum about what's someone's level of English skills. We heard a lot of different things about more information we could be collecting when it comes to court cases. One of the most common ones was people wish we could collect some information about civil cases, especially when it came to things like divorce proceedings or child custody.
I'm sorry, Caleb, I'm going to jump in a little bit here just because this is related to Christina's comment in the chat that they use InfoNet to, in Excel to document more details about orders of protection that InfoNet doesn't capture. So just wanted to acknowledge that for the group while we're talking about limitations of InfoNet's ability to track some court data.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Christina, was it? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So yeah, sorry, I'm often not looking at the chat, so yeah, feel free to chime in, Jen, next time someone says something.
That's why we're here, so don't worry about that. Heather and I will take care of that.
So yeah, a lot of DV shelters said we should collect more info that would help them with the administration of their shelter. And places said we could collect services in a way that are more closely aligned with how they provide services. Like one place said we provide a group service that stretches over across multiple days, and that's just really a headache to put into InfoNet currently. Top 2 things here, correct me if I'm wrong, Jen, are currently in the pipeline for actually being implemented. So we're currently working on a way where you can track monthly changes to income and employment status, things like that. And we're also working to make ourselves more compliant with HUD's new standards. And kind of following from that, we're aware that we probably will have to add more detailed housing information moving forward. One person mentioned an industry standard like child psychology checklist that they felt our child behaviors field could be modeled after instead. And places mentioned it'd be nice to be able to collect information police officers provide for victim outreach. People also said it'd be nice if we had more features to avoid redundancy, and this could be anything like graying out a box if it doesn't apply, or even just allowing more NA options across more fields. We've also heard from places that it can sometimes be problematic if a former client's returns with a different last name, because oftentimes they get just entered as a new person, as a new client. Currently, you have to come to us to either merge the cases or delete one, but people said it'd be great if they'd be able to do that on their own. People wanted to track clients across multiple programs, and people said there should be an easy way to identify and old clients that are still unclosed, which is doable with exception reports. So part of that problem is available, and we hopefully will be offering some more training on reports in the not too distant future. And just out of curiosity, I did look at this, and 6% of DV clients who have not received a service in over a year remain unclosed. So it is something that happens, but it's not a huge gargantuan concern at the moment. And final slide of this, places mentioned there should be the ability to assign clients as case managers to clients, to track clients, to close clients for just some services. We know currently by only collecting age of first contact, you can't really age up a client who turns from a minor into an adult, but places said we should do something that allows that. And finally, interestingly enough, 2 people from the same center told us we should collect more detailed information about strangulation. Initially, it seemed a bit odd, but I know there's research out there that says strangulation is one of the biggest predictors of someone committing intimate partner homicide in the future. So that would be something that would be useful to have additional information on hand. So if I put down each and every bullet point that people told us, this section would be the full 2 hours. But I thought we'd give a little bit of time using this whiteboard feature to, if anyone wants to chime in on things that weren't mentioned, ideas you've just had recently, or even just providing more information, just take a minute. I'm going to switch over to this whiteboard feature. Hopefully you see it now. This should allow you to just pick a corner, type out your idea, what new feature, what new field or feature we should add. And if it's something that we think a lot of people might have strong opinions about, we'll actually open up the floor to hear more about that. So just take a few minutes.
So folks, you need to click on the T, which is right next to your arrow, and then that will let you type on the whiteboard. There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I asked you to use it, and I didn't even quite remember how to use it.
If you can't figure that out, or if you're on the phone, feel free to keep typing in the chat box, and we'll pull it over to the whiteboard for you.
So more, oh. Okay, we'll give it another minute, see if there's anything else.
Caleb, can you zoom out a little bit too so people can see? They can't see everything.
Oh, okay. There we go. Okay, yeah.
It's the same zoom button that you use for the QR code.
Okay, yeah, I saw it and used it. It changed for you, right?
It did not change for me, but I'm a host. Can folks now see everything that's written? Let us know in the chat box.
This is Jen. I can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, including my own, which is just instructional. Is that how many are supposed to be on there?
That's about how many I see. Okay, so and I'm
okay. A lot of data about orders of protection and maybe some hotel stays for sexual assault clients.
Oh, track court proceedings when one or more offender, and track the offender that it pertains to. Yes.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Okay. And I think this one, I guess technically we could have done this in the chat box. Heather just showed me all the fancy bells and whistles, and but this one I think we'll ask you to raise your hand for. Is there anything where you would have us either change how we collect data or any field you think, okay, I see now after the fact that I was blocking the top 3 sentences, unfortunately. Okay, sorry. Is there any field that we should change either how we collect the data, or any field you think we could probably stand to remove from InfoNet because it's just collecting data that you don't really think is relevant or too useful? This one, just raise your hand and we'll hear from you. Anything you think we should either tweak or even just delete. Oh, I see Kevin. I'll unmute you, Kevin.
So I think it would be important for me. What I find most useful about InfoNet, besides the standard reports, is the CSV export functionality of it. That allows me to look into data in many different ways that I wouldn't be able to do. I don't know how much training has been provided to people on how to use that, and it might be more of an Excel kind of one-on-one kind of training. But when I pull reports from there, most of the time I end up pulling them via CSV. So it's just fun.
Anything else? Anything related to either adding or subtracting fields from InfoNet?
This is Jen jumping in again. So Kevin, is that something you like, or that you think we should change somehow or improve in some way? Is Kevin still unmuted?
Hello?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I love it.
Oh, good. Okay. So you were just giving us a compliment, or
yeah, to be honest with you, and I might have some staff here that are on the phone. The ability to navigate that functionality of InfoNet opens up a whole different world on how to pull data, how to look at data, how to deduplicate data, how to apply, it really, I love InfoNet. I think InfoNet is great, and it allows me to do so many things, but without that CSV functionality, I would miss out on tons of capability to be able to pull and look at my data in different ways that then goes to other funding sources, or whether that's a United Way or a foundation, or, oh, I want to know how many kids that were 3 to 5 that came from this county that, that's a matter of minutes that I can navigate that data via the CSV functionality that's offered.
Okay, thank you. We do need to offer better training on that so that other people can take advantage of those benefits. So that is fully planned.
Okay, thanks Kevin, for being our hype man there. So one final question I have before we move on and start presenting more is, again, we're keenly aware of the fact that there's this gap between what InfoNet currently collects and what HUD is looking for, but we're also curious, is there any ways that either what InfoNet collects or the kinds of reports it generates differ from what your funders are looking for? And this is one, just raise your hand. I assume it's just I didn't clear Kevin's hand. Maybe he has more to say, but.
I don't see any hands raised.
Okay.
So again, if there is a particular funder where InfoNet reports do not satisfy that funder's requirements, let us know. You can type it in the chat box if you think of it later.
Yeah. Yep. And you'll have our emails at the end of the presentation as well. Okay.
So Kevin raised his hand again, so I think he wants to tell you something.
Okay. Okay, you're unmuted.
Yeah, I mean, nobody spoke up. I mean, the elephant in the room is HUD. I mean, that's the HMIS data elements that are required for anybody that receives any EST or COC funded. I mean, that's the elephant in the room. Yeah. And Caleb, you know as well as I that there has been a long history of HUD changing those data requirements regularly, which I know that the dilemma that poses to you all in creating the infrastructure in the background to support those regular changes in data elements. So anyway, that's it.
Thanks for that. I don't see any other hands, so we'll move on, switch gears a little bit to thinking about how centers use information. And wow, that text is somewhat small, sorry. So yeah, we asked you how important is data from either InfoNet or other sources to your organization when making these decisions. Top one is making decisions related to staffing, making decisions related to use of funding, making decisions related to providing services generally, or working with specific clients to develop a service plan. The least important use of data was working with clients to develop a service plan, and it seems like data is most used for funding and providing services generally. And we're kind of curious how this differs, how use of data differs across centers. It looks like DV-only centers are more likely to use data to develop a specific service plan for a specific client. And it looks like larger centers tend to put more emphasis on data for providing services generally. We also asked you whether your program had a logic model. We found that 22% of places have just one general logic model for their overall program. About 32% have different logic models for different programs. So now we get to one of our big concerns, and we actually have a series of reports coming out soon that look at this, that look at data quality and completeness. Those reports are one big piece of the puzzle, but what you provided us in the survey is another piece. And why we're so interested in completeness is, data quality and completeness is because systematic issues can sometimes hamper our ability to do analysis. So if one center enters data in one way, one center omits data or uses a lot more or a lot fewer of the check all boxes, it can make it difficult to look at regional changes, regional differences across Illinois. So we're really interested in whether there are systematic differences in data entry. And one of the main things we asked you guys about, we asked you two questions, whether you omit data due to concerns about client confidentiality, and whether you omit data for some responses and only enter other responses. And what we mean by that second one is maybe you might enter yes for pregnancy status if a client is pregnant, and you might just leave the field blank and not enter anything if they're not pregnant. So these are the two things we asked. You can see, by and large, places omit data not very frequently. And interestingly enough, going into this, we really expected rural places to omit data due to concerns about confidentiality more, just because they serve more tight-knit communities where someone's race or gender identity might make them easily identifiable. But actually, there was no impact of urbanicity on omitting data due to concerns about confidentiality. Here you can see the things that tend to get omitted due to confidentiality. We have victim's location, gender identity, and race are the top ones. And to just get a quick idea of, well, how big of an issue are omissions due to confidentiality, I decided to look at how frequently zip code gets omitted. And over the past 5 years, only 3% of DV clients have missing zip code. So although we were a little concerned initially, it doesn't seem to be an issue. And here's what tends to get omitted due to concerns, get omitted in certain cases, things like income, pregnancy status, education, and sexual orientation. And once again, we just wanted to look at a quick snapshot of one of these. So we looked at pregnancy status and found over the past 5 years, 8% of DV clients have their pregnancy status missing. It has a little room for improvement, but it's still nothing to be concerned about. And we were also curious in what % of all services get entered at a center. And you can see we have the comparison between 2016 and 2020. And I guess the three areas we're still a little concerned about are there's been a slight drop in people entering training in other community organizations, and also a slight drop in public education, outreach, and prevention. And also media and publication services are still the least entered. A full third of centers don't enter all services in that area. We also asked you to rate InfoNet in 3 different areas. Maybe I could probably zoom in. This helps, hopefully. So we asked you about these 3 different areas just to see over the past 4 years and since these InfoNet 2.0 updates, how much improvement has been made. And we found we've made the most improvement when it came to ease of identifying and correcting data errors, and we had the least improvement when it came to accurately representing the work of your center. So at least the needle has kind of moved on all 3 of these. And what we found, which isn't too surprising, oh, now I should zoom back out. What we found, which isn't too surprising, is that centers which have another additional data system wind up rating InfoNet worse in all 3 of those measures. So we were kind of uniquely curious about this one that we haven't been able to move the needle so much. The one where we've seen the least improvement over the past 4 years is how InfoNet represents the work of your center, either when it comes to things like the services you provide, or the type of clientele you serve. So I thought we'd ask you guys, and feel free to raise your hand if you think there's any way InfoNet could be improved in representing the work of your center. Let us know if there's anything that currently is slipping through the cracks, so to speak. See, Francis, I'm going to unmute you, Francis.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I don't necessarily have a suggestion for this, but I know that as far as representation of services provided, we have so many clients in the DV sector that reach out to us maybe for one particular service, their information to say, so we can't get service into InfoNet. So a lot of those hours that are spent by program staff aren't collected. We try to, fit it in other boxes where it possibly could be collected, but I think that's a lot of where our shortfalls come from, is that we're providing a lot more service hours than we can actually log in InfoNet due to, not establishing every individual who reaches out for our service as a client.
Thanks for that, Francis. Anyone else before we move on? Okay, let's move on. We also asked you how frequently you want to report an InfoNet but can't find the appropriate report. And this is one area where we have a lot of room for improvement, because almost half of respondents said they sometimes or often can't find the appropriate report in InfoNet. And this is one of the areas where we found that centers that have a mixture of data entry and InfoNet responsibilities tend to have more difficulties finding reports compared to those centers that either have a designated person or have everyone enter their own data. We also asked you how confident you believe your staff are when it comes to both generating and interpreting reports. And the story's a bit rosier here. You said your staff, about 62% say their staff is either very confident or extremely confident when it comes to in generating and interpreting the reports. But just beyond just reports in general, we wanted to know how useful places find specific types of reports. And what we found was we were most interested in those reports that are underutilized and not judged very useful. And we found ad hoc reports, exception reports, and standard offender, medical, and criminal justice reports are the 3 that there's room for improvement that currently providers don't find particularly useful. Just like above, for usefulness of reports, we found that centers that have a mixture of data entry and InfoNet responsibilities tend to find several reports, especially exception reports and ad hoc reports, less useful than those that use other data strategies. And since the most recent addition to these reports were the ad hoc reports, so we were uniquely curious about those. And we found that half of all centers don't even show up in this list because they say we never even use ad hoc reports at all, so we can't even answer this question. So we're really interested in kind of moving the needle, getting more places possibly using ad hoc reports. And we found that rural centers and smaller centers tend to have never used ad hoc reports, whereas more urban centers and more larger centers tend to be utilizing them. So I thought we'd hopefully hear from both sides of the coin here. So first off, those that never really use ad hoc reports at your center, what hurdles currently prevent you from using them, and what maybe can we at InfoNet start to do to remove those hurdles? This is the one, just raise your hand if you want to share your opinion.
Jill had some comments in the chat box, which they accidentally sent only to me, so I'm going to read them for you. It says, ad hoc reports take a long time to run, and that Jill's requesting faster processing.
Okay, that's, I don't know if that's doable. That's definitely, I think, not my area. I don't want to make promises that someone else would have to fill. But yeah, that's good to know that it's kind of, in part, just because they're not convenient to run at the moment. Anything else?
I just want to respond to that. That's interesting. I'm sorry, was that Jill you said, Heather?
Yes, Jill Sanders.
Okay. Yeah, I might like to reach out and dig deeper about that because I was not aware that they took a lot of time to process. I can see where they would take a lot of time to build, and I will also acknowledge, I'm sure this may have been on many of you's mind, is we need to provide a training on using the ad hoc feature. That will, I think, certainly help. It does look a little probably overwhelming if you haven't used it before, so we'll definitely, that is something else that's planned for this spring. But I didn't realize about slow processing time, so we'll definitely want to learn more about that.
Okay. And okay, looks like nothing else. We'll move on to the other side of the equation. So obviously it sounds like some people on this call tend not to use them, but we'd like to maybe hear some success stories. So those whose centers use them commonly, what do ad hoc reports help you do? What have they helped you figure out for your center? Is there any success stories you'd want to share with those that don't use ad hoc reports, just so we can all get a feel of what's doable, what can be improved for center administration? Anything in the chat box?
Nope, not yet.
Okay. Okay, so I guess we'll move on. Feel free to type into the chat box later. So we asked you what types of things you wish you could do with reports. And I'll say right now, I think at least a handful of what I read are things that are actually currently doable with either exception reports or ad hoc reports. So part of this is just the onus is on us, like Jen was saying, to provide further training in how to fully utilize all the reports. But beyond those cases, here's a few other things people said. Some people said it'd be useful to know which services are typically received in combination. Again, we know that the way InfoNet collects and displays race and ethnicity is a little bit different oftentimes from what funders are looking for. People wanted more comprehensive filter options when it came to running reports. And one of the most interesting ones I heard was, so currently when you use the filter option, you can select a case. And what that means is you can ask it, only show me demographics for people in this zip code and for people only in 60608. But someone suggested we should add a split feature where you can split by zip code and it'll run a series of reports, a unique one for each zip code. And the person said that'd be a lot easier and less tedious than having to select 60608. then run a new report, select 60607. The split feature would make it more convenient to kind of look at how different zip codes or different certain groups, are using your services. We also asked you this whole big list about
Caleb?
what you, oh, sorry, yes?
No, that's all right. I'm sorry. I just wanted to address Francis's question in the chat box, and I suspect others may be wondering the same. The question is, why are race and ethnicity grouped together in InfoNet? And it's actually, we used to have them separate. I think you were around when they were, so you probably remember that. And the problem we were having is some Latinx clients who identified as Hispanic did not want to identify with any of the race categories that were available, so we were getting high numbers of unknown clients with an unknown race. So by grouping them together, it just gave clients who do identify as Latinx to feel less pressure to identify with one of the race categories that they may not identify with, so that's why we group them together. If you run a standard report and before you click the generate button, you change the output format. This is what Kevin was describing earlier. If you change it from HTML, which is the default option, to CSV, you will see a line-by-line race ethnicity description for each client. So it might be easier for you to group them in different ways that, you know, the summary totals may not necessarily, you know, be the format that you need, and you can get it into that format a little easier by running it as a CSV. And another comment related, it would be nice to have a report where anyone who selects multiple race categories is grouped in the category 2 or more races, like in the census. Yes, but if we did that, it would also kind of take away the ability to identify the number of clients that identified in one category, regardless as to whether or not they identified with multiple categories. So there's pros and cons, and the CSV functionality in your reports, I think, will help with this. But we also want to develop a report that automatically converts your client data into mutually exclusive race and ethnicity categories to make it a little easier for you. So then you would be able to get it in both ways. Okay, I'll stop now. Sorry.
No, thanks. Like that was news to me, even the history of the race ethnicity categories. So we asked you, I think there's 11 here, 11 different things about whether your center uses InfoNet to do these things. Most common, probably it's the reason a lot of you got involved with InfoNet, right, was supporting formal reports to funders. This whole huge list, though, we decided to kind of concentrate on those things that are underutilized, like strategic planning, reporting to the broader community, and case management. And we were also curious about program evaluation, because we've seen a little bit of drop in the use of that InfoNet for that over the past 4 years. Even designing the survey, we were really interested in how InfoNet can be improved for using case management. So we asked you this follow-up question about for those whose centers don't use case management. And it looks like the most common reason places don't use case management is they're not sure how to use InfoNet for that. So part of that's just the onus is on us as a training thing. Next most common is InfoNet doesn't have enough useful data. So once again, maybe adding more fields or amending our fields. And again, some places say they just have another data system that they use for that instead of InfoNet. So I thought I'd go through quickly a few of the lesser utilized fields. We just wanted, almost for our own edification, to figure out what centers are more apt to use them than other centers. So we found that for reporting to the broader community and or media, it was less common among urban centers, more common among larger centers, and more common among dual centers that serve both sexual assault and domestic violence clients. Using InfoNet to view info about clients served is more common in large centers and rural centers. Use of InfoNet for program evaluation is more common in smaller centers. Use to identify service gaps in the community is more common among rural centers. using us to review trends over time is less common among places with another data system. And use for strategic planning is more common among rural centers. And just overall, across all 11 things we offered, we found that rural centers tend to be using InfoNet for more total things. So when we add a new feature to InfoNet, it takes a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to add. So we thought we'd ask 4 hypothetical additions just to gauge how much interest there is in each of the 4. So we asked you these 4, and what we found was there's the most interest in bulking up InfoNet to better show trends over time. And right after that is allowing InfoNet to easily show you cross-tabulations with column percentages. And the other 2 still had a fair degree of interest, and those are a checkbox to easily link services with the presenting issue it's addressing, and the ability to enter client case notes directly into InfoNet. This one almost is a tautology. It's almost not worth saying, but places that put more emphasis on data to drive decision-making have more support for all of the 4. That's not too much of a surprise, right? You want more toys to play with in InfoNet. The other thing which was interesting was places with another data system have more interest in us adding cross-tabulations with column percent. So that maybe that's something that their other data system is doing that InfoNet isn't at the moment. And to this list of 4, we add the one new feature that's actually in the pipeline. That's a series of outcome scales that can measure how much change clients have experienced over their services. This was measured with a slightly different Likert scale, but I still thought it'd be useful to see how much interest there was compared to the rest. We asked this quick follow-up question about what do you foresee using this outcome scale for? This is very small, so I should probably just read them off, but all of the 3 have about 70% saying they would use it for program evaluation, informing client case management, and for understanding how services help certain subsets of clients. After the InfoNet portion, we will talk a little bit about the data we collected in the survey about how your center is dealing with COVID-19. But as we draw this portion of the survey to a close, thought we'd show you this high altitude question, just how likely you would be to recommend InfoNet to someone else at a different center. Half said they'd be very likely, a third and another third said they'd be somewhat likely. But this isn't just all us patting ourselves on the back here. There are differences. We had the most, there was the most likelihood from people with data entry and administrative support roles, and there were the least likelihood of recommending us from people who held directorial roles or overseeing their programs. So this is interesting. It might suggest that when it comes to the day-to-day things, InfoNet is doing pretty well, but we still might have improvements to make when it comes to answering big picture questions, which program directors might be preoccupied with. And we also found that centers that have another data system are less likely to say they'd recommend InfoNet. Oh,
yeah, Kevin has his hand raised again. I'm not sure if he has a comment he wants to share.
Okay, one second. Okay, you're unmuted, Kevin.
I have a question, Caleb, actually. I'm sorry for speaking so much. I'm very intrigued, and I might have missed this, the outcome measures. I don't know what they are. They just the standard ones we're talking about? I know more ways to plan for my safety, or is it something that's more intuitive where it's able to tell from the data in the record whether a particular outcome was met, like increased income or obtainment of housing, and I might have missed something in the past hearing more about that. So could you expand upon that at all? Or?
I think Jen can fill it in more, but they're the more subjective measures about how it's improved the client's quality of life. I can't remember precisely.
Well, I have to. That is the plan, but there have been some challenges with the InfoNet Stepping Forward project in terms of procuring a external vendor we may not be able to get as much done as we hope to, but the highest priority item on that project is being able to build in the capacity to collect a lot of InfoNet's currently existing fields at multiple time points. So to address your question about income, the non-cash benefits, and particularly those that HUD requires, that's going to be top priority. And we have had planning groups where we talked about various scales that are out there, things like hope, quality of life, and I think those are, I mean, I want to talk to providers more about what they think about those scales, but it looks like that might be more challenging to implement in the near future.
Well, I think if it was, that would be great to have some outcome measures, and you know, outside of the, you know, I know more ways to plan for my safety, you know, especially if it could look at that data over time and just build that itself. I could envision using that. I mean, you mentioned HUD, but I can envision using that for lots of different things. So I'd be interested to, you know, hear more about that in the future. Thanks, Jennifer.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks. So we'll draw this portion to, oh yeah, there are a few odds and ends that people suggested that didn't really fit in other categories. One was multiple people suggested we implement multi-factor authentication. And one interesting suggestion, so even on our end, we collect a revision stamp that shows when a piece of, when a field was either entered or edited, but we don't collect the ID of the staff who does it. And someone mentioned it would be useful to do that in order for, if there's something where it either seems like it could be a misentry or something like that, you can easily track down that staff member. So say there's a client that's 15 years old and listed as a high school graduate, you could easily just identify which staff member entered it to determine whether it was, that's accurate, or maybe it was just mishitting something when entering. So we draw this portion to a close with some basic recommendations, a lot for ourselves, but we have a few just basic ones to for centers in general. One is we found, especially when it comes to reports, places that have a mixture of data entry habits tend to have more difficulties with reports in some other areas. So we know it's not always possible to switch. Sometimes a mixture is just a necessity, but it might be worthwhile to consider switching to one of the other two possibilities, either designated entry person or having everyone enter their own data. Also, we found that, again, we found that there weren't too many concerns when it came to omissions, but whenever possible, and we know it's not always possible, limit omissions. And we do have some upcoming material coming out. We'll have a series of reports that looks at data quality and completeness in InfoNet. And we will have training material that'll help with how to best utilize all 6 of the reporting tools, including our most recent edition, the ad hoc reports. But we also have a lot of takeaways for ourselves here. One big takeaway is, again, there's been the shift towards having, towards more and more places having a second data system. So we should really beef up our import options, both to make it less tedious for you, but also just to increase the data quality and completeness that we have on hand. And I talked about a lot of suggestions people had. I just distilled, I believe, 8 of them into this list here. And using that arrow feature, again, it's up and to the left, point to which of these 8 you see as should be the tip-top priority for us, or something that we should consider implementing rather than just talking about it hypothetically. So yeah, just point off to the side. Okay, training. I'll give you guys a minute. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of a rainbow here. Okay, so pretty much I've seen arrows at pretty much everything except splitting the cases doesn't have much concern. Looks like training's a big concern. Viewing trends over time, recording who enters data are So I should just take a screenshot here because yeah, this won't last. Yeah, thanks so many of you for chiming in here, and again, I know there's probably some of them, some of these you probably have multiple wishes for. Thanks. I'm gonna remove these arrows. And these are a few things that we're a few of the big takeaways for categories to add or change. Again, people want more user-friendly ways to look at race ethnicity. There was a lot of concern about adding things related to immigration and citizenship status. And again, this is one that we're currently actually working on, more user-friendly ways to view and track changes to income and employment status. But however, we know this isn't comprehensive. If there's anything that's just came up these past 15 minutes when you've heard me talking, anything you want to add or advocate for, or any additional changes to InfoNet before we move on to talking about how your centers are dealing with COVID-19, please either raise your hand or use the chat box, and we'll hear from you if there's anything additional you want to add that just didn't fit in any of the other question prompts. Oh, okay, Rachel, you're unmuted.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
So this just came to mind, and I don't think I put it in my survey, but one thing I've noticed when pulling reports, if I'm looking at breakdown by city, we have some manual just typos, Chicago spelled 5 different ways, things like that. So I wasn't sure if there's a way for things to be sort of, I don't know if it can be like based on a mapping system so that we don't have as much human error there.
And then yeah,
I think I can help with that. Yeah, there is a way. It's a little tedious, but there is a way in the ad hoc reports to generate a list of all your client IDs and what city. So I've done this for a couple of centers, and I'm happy to help you with the same. But we use the ad hoc report to basically pull all the client IDs and their city. Then I sort them alphabetically, and that makes it easier to identify the misspellings. And then once you know the client ID with a misspelled city, you need to go into that client ID's record and change the spelling and save it.
Okay.
But after, some of you have been entering data for 23 years now, so there might be a lot. So another thing I've recommended is also pulling the first contract date, so you can at least maybe prioritize clients for the last year or 5 years or however you want to prioritize.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, someone, I think Olga had her hand up, and then we'll, someone use the text thing as well. Olga, you're unmuted.
I have a question on service categories. Our center provides 24-hour emergency responses to emergency rooms where victims present injuries and want advocacy. And currently, the only service category in the service line items is, I think it's medical assistance. And there's no way to differentiate those medical advocacy in-person responses at hospitals, which take a significant amount of staff resources, to separate that from other basic medical assistance. And I wonder if that somehow could be separated so we can track more easily information on those medical advocacies in emergency rooms, that 24-hour response that we do both for sexual assault and domestic violence.
Thanks for that, Jen. This is, I guess, one area where I'm still a little.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Olga. It's nice to hear your voice, too. Yeah, and I'm seeing, I think some other participants are seconding that. Whenever we, consider changing InfoNet service categories that we work with ICADV and DHS and try to come up with a definition that works for everybody. And yeah, I mean so do you have a need to report on just the emergency types of medical response that you're describing?
That we do, and we don't want to minimize that by lumping it into other just medical advocacy in the service line item. Yeah, we do have other grants that support only medical, those medical, 24-hour response. And it would be nice to have additional information that's segregated just on that.
Okay. Note taken. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin.
And Anne, I have also documented that you've seconded that, so something to seriously think about.
Looks like Kevin was next. Kevin, you're unmuted.
All right. So there's a great chart, and I don't know if I have the recent one. I have it in the InfoNet definitions. And it was last modified, the version I have is 7.7.11. But there's a great chart that defines the, names the service for DV service, provides the definition, provides examples, and then has the client type. First of all, I might be operating on an older version, I don't know. My question is there a similar chart somewhere for ICASA definitions?
Yes, it's not quite as detailed as, and I can answer yes, that is the latest version you're looking at.
Okay.
We do need to develop an updated one because we have added services for a safe exchange supervised visitation recently. But yes, ICASA has one too, and I can share that. It's basically just the name of the service category and the definition.
So that would be?
It doesn't have the examples and the client types like the DV one does, but.
Okay, but that's the one that ICASA has posted to their website, like in their service policy. Is that the same thing? Yeah, it'd be great if you'd post it. I can take it from there.
Okay, and actually, ICASA just this morning, literally before this webinar started, sent me an updated version of that. So they have added some service categories recently and created definitions.
How will that be posted, Jennifer?
I don't know. I haven't responded to the email yet. I just know that they sent me the definitions because I had asked them for that a couple weeks ago. So.
Can you forward it out to this group?
I will ask before I do that, but I hope so, and let you know one way or the other.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
And I do want to acknowledge on the screen someone said zip code reports, that some zip codes are duplicate for certain areas.
I think I might know what this is about, but for the and I can't see who. Caleb, can you tell who? Oh, it disappeared.
No, I couldn't even when it was up tell who said it.
Well, that may be from the management reports. If there is somebody that has a service record that's earlier than their first contact date, which we prevent in InfoNet now, but it used to be you could enter a service for a person even a month before their first contact date, and when it is before their first contact date, it means there's no geographic or residence info tied to that, so it may show up, or if somebody has multiple records for a zip code, it may show up in different areas. So if that person wants to contact InfoNet help, we can figure out what's going on there more deeply.
Okay. Thanks for that. So just like in the at the end of the survey, we had that abrupt transition to asking about how COVID's impacted your center. Right now, we're going to have one more abrupt transition to talking about what you told us about how COVID is impacting your centers. We do have one more report coming out that looks at the first 3.5 months of the pandemic through the end of June, how DV and SA centers have been affected in various ways. But this is hearing directly from you at the end of August, beginning of September, is another piece of the puzzle. And here's what you told us. Just over 60% of centers said COVID-19 caused their revenue to decrease. And the flip side is also well over half of centers said COVID-19 has caused an increase in their operational costs. And 45% of centers were getting hit on both fronts. 45% of centers told us that they are seeing a decrease in revenue. At the same time, they're seeing an increase in costs. And here's just a quick rundown of some, before I get into that, one interesting finding, and I'm honestly not sure what to make of it, is that urban centers were less likely to see their costs rise compared to other centers. It's an interesting finding. I'm not quite sure of the takeaway from it, though. Here are just some examples people gave us about how COVID is impacting their costs. Obviously, there is this need to switch to remote work, so that we need to get staff with laptops and other material to work remotely. There's also the need to get technology like getting signatures, as well as getting a 24-hour hotline up and running to work remotely. There's obviously COVID-19, there's a need for cleaning, so there's additional costs for both workers as well as supplies. There's the need for hazard pay for employees and providing PPE. Some places reporting losing revenue from having to cancel fundraising events or closing their thrift stores to the public. There's more costs associated with having clients in hotels, mainly feeding. Some places said they were able to offset this with PPP loans, but others said that they were hit so hard that some side effects included letting clients go, letting staff go, I should say. And one place even said that they had to lose the lease on one of their offices. We also asked you how it impacted your staff's availability. About half of places said their staff's availability decreased during COVID-19, and another quarter said that it was a mixture among different staff with different roles. A lot of places said they had to cancel events and outreach, but interestingly, at least when we took when we had the survey, there were a few rural places that volunteered and said, yeah, we're still able to get into hospitals and schools. I'd be curious during the Q&A to hear if that's still the case 3 months later, but at least back then that occurred. Places said they lost staff when they had to either take off time for positive tests, or even they had to wait on a negative test to clear. Staff who were parents obviously had their hours changed when schools went remote. Places obviously worked reduced on-site staff, staggered shifts, and in large part, especially in college towns, people saw a drop in interns and volunteers. And part of this sounds like it was due to when campuses closed, college students went home and were no longer available for volunteering. We do end with this chart, though, which is, I guess, one of the more optimistic ones. Despite everything, you've overwhelmingly told us that your organization has adapted pretty well to the challenges associated with COVID-19. But you let us know that COVID-19 did have a bunch of changes to your clients' needs. It's not surprising that a lot of places have been adopting telephone counseling, but this isn't without its challenges. Some clients just don't see the value in it and wind up dropping out. Other clients, particularly those who might be impoverished or elderly, have tech issues, and telephone counseling or virtual counseling is less feasible for them. It's difficult to build rapport and foster empathy over the phone compared to being in person. Some places say it's not really worth it for younger children. Younger children have to be in the room with the counselor. And places said that it's especially challenging if someone's sheltering in place with their abuser in their home. A lot of people told us their clients had increases in financial needs, and this was especially true for undocumented clients because they weren't eligible for a lot of government assistance. Places reported additional abuse due to slowdown in court cases, and it's no surprise, right, that fear of the anxiety about the disease, economic change, and social change is a it's a big stressor for all of us, and places reported more stress and anxiety with their clients, to the point where some clients who had closed their cases decided to return because the additional stress of COVID-19 was exacerbating some issues. There were a few final things: the change need for technology, either for kids to do remote learning in shelters or court cases. It was more challenging to match up clients with someone who can accommodate their special language needs. Places reported longer shelter stays, and something I hadn't even thought of. In shelters, there was a need for each household to have a private bathroom just to reduce various surface contamination. So I went through all the lists and just coded the biggest needs people told us about. The two biggest needs were financial and housing and shelter needs that both increased during COVID-19. Technology needs were a big one after, and this is something we might want to add to our little checkbox of needs, because this is something we don't even offer in the check all boxes. So again, we have this report coming out. It's just the first 3.5 months of the pandemic, and even the data we're showing you right now is about 3 months old, right? So we thought we'd ask you, in those 3 months since you took the survey, I think I click poll now. Is the poll showing up? Heather, you might have to take over for getting the poll to show up.
Did you click open poll?
I clicked on polling. Is there something additional to open it up?
You see the little open poll button?
Oh, yes, I do. Okay, so we're opening this poll. And we're curious because obviously past 3 months cases have risen, but also places have had more chance to adapt to the world we're living in. So take a minute, let us know, at least in your center, how these past 3 months since you take the survey, how things have changed. Okay, well, I think I'll give it about 30 seconds more, let everyone who feels comfortable to answer.
You'll be able to get 20 or 30 seconds to finish once you hit close poll.
Oh, okay. I'll hit close poll now then. Oh, yeah, I see.
And then if you click share poll results and apply, then everyone can see the answers.
Okay. Results applied. Can you all see them now? So hope can they see them now? So hopefully you're looking at what I'm looking at, and looks like generally speaking, places have either stayed the same or have seen some improvement when it came, and thankfully no places have said their ability to meet clients' needs have greatly deteriorated over these past 3 months. So do I have to click anything to go back just to the normal PowerPoint?
Nope.
Okay. So we thought we'd close with this to hear a bit more detail and in-depth from you all, maybe just to commiserate about how it's been a challenge. But what has changed over the past 3 months, or just changed in general? How is this I think we're currently in the third wave. How has this third wave impacted your center? And is there anything we should add to InfoNet going forward? Like I said, one idea was adding a technology needs checkbox, just because clients seem to need technology needs to work remotely. So take a second, think about it, and we'll call in some people with raised hands in a moment who want to share their center's experience.
folks that are confused, you're asking them to either chat or raise their hand, right? This is not a poll.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, either or. I'm looking at the raise your hand thing. So. And it's entirely possible, right, that people are just sick of talking about COVID-19 at this point. Okay, well, if any final ideas come into mind, especially things that we might want to add in the client intake measures or tweak because of the demands of meeting the pandemic, feel free to email us. So thanks all for showing up today. I hope you learned something. We got some good ideas from you in addition to what you told us in the survey. Any questions, feel free to direct them either to myself or Jen or just to InfoNet Help. We'll be on the lookout there as well. And anything either of you want to add, Jen or Heather?
I just wanted to thank everybody for coming here today, and especially the stories I have heard over the last 9 months have just been amazing, how you've all adapted and are really just in the trenches of this. And there are so many things that really make this a perfect storm for people who are experiencing domestic violence. And I've heard partnering with hotels and people working like crazy shifts, just all kinds of really like examples of you all going above and beyond, and just can't thank you enough. I mean, I've been really amazed and inspired at how you all are just responding to this crisis in so many different ways. So just wanted to say thank you.
Before people escape, I put up a QR code, which goes, if you put your camera phone on that QR code, it takes you right to our survey for the training. I will also send out a link, but if you want to do it right now and get it out of the way, it will only take a minute. You can do that now. And Francis had a hand up and then lowered it, so not sure if they still have a question. And yes, I will be sending out these PowerPoint slides to everyone on this webinar.
Okay, looks like Francis's hand is raised again. I can't unmute at this point. I guess you're host, not your presenter now. So.
Go ahead, Francis.
This was not related to the last question, but I think something. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, this is not related particularly to the last question in regards to clients, and I don't think our IT manager is on this call, but one of the concerns I know when we switched to mostly remote work for those of us who are pulling reports, who are logging things in InfoNet, it became apparent how difficult it is that InfoNet is specific to the computer and the user. Although now I'm in a good spot because I have a new laptop and being remote, but it's about the question of is there a possibility of being able to just log in web-based without it having to be specifically assigned to each computer. And I don't know if Kevin wants to kind of finish my thoughts on there, but that was a big, we discussed that a lot with our IT manager about that. I don't know if other people struggle with that, but I think the pandemic really brought that out when we were, working from home in 48 hours and we're like, oh no, now how are we going to get on InfoNet?
Thanks for raising that, Francis. Yeah, I would be interested to know how others feel about that, because that is honestly something we have the ability to remove, but it's there for extra security. So directors know that the staff who they give InfoNet access to are only able to access from those authorized devices, and they can't log in from just any computer. And it's a lot of work for us. It's a lot of extra time to set up the security software that way. So yeah, would love to hear thoughts. It's, really just to protect the data. But sometimes burdens outweigh some of the benefits. Does anybody else have thoughts on that one way or the other? Okay.
Not seeing any more hands.
Maybe we should have included that as a question on the survey. And I mean, anything that increases, you know, risk, I'm really leery about, you know, but we want to make your work as easy as possible too. So it's a tough one.
So I guess thanks everyone for participating. And like I said, feel free to reach out with anything that might occur to you after the fact. Both Jen and I are available either through our own emails or the InfoNet help email.